Sundays for the Chodesh Daf, the Daf Samach Zayin, and yesterday we learned all about Min B'Mina, Min B'She'ena Mina, or yesterday's Daf. But today we add another variable to this whole thing, and that's called Noisen Tam Lebgam. Noisen Tam Lebgam is with the flavor, the taste that it exudes, is actually ruining the food. The Isser that's joining the food and mixing the food actually ruins the food. Is that still a problem of Isser, or do we say because there's no benefit, then it doesn't really bother us? So we'll talk about that in today's Gemara. But first, says the Gemara, Zeh HaKla. If it gives positive flavor, then it's us. If it gives a negative flavor, it's not us. That's the halacha. What? The Noisen Tam Lebgam is mutter. And he says as follows. It says talks about vinegar. Mishnah gives an example. The vinegar falls on these split beans, it ruins it. So therefore, it doesn't. It's a pagam, Noisen Tam Lebgam, and therefore it's not us. Says the Mishnah. Says the Gemara. By the way, when we say Noisen Tam Lebgam is mutter, it means b'di'evet, not the chatchila. You can go ahead and eat it, but b'di'evet, if it happened already, if it already happened, then it's all right. So lo yishanu, it's talking about ella shenafol l'toich grisin reischin. When does it ruin it? Only if the grisin, only if these split beans are hot. So then the vinegar absolutely ruins it. However, avol nafol, if it fell in l'toich grisin tzayinin, if it fell into cold split beans, then actually it improves it. It gives it some flavor. But then the hirtichon, if you heat it up afterwards, so what happened is first you improve the flavor, the iser, the vinegar, came into the split beans and improved the flavor. And then after you heat it up, it ruined it. How do we treat that? It starts off l'shavach, it starts off in a good way, and it ends off l'pagam. So we say it's exactly what we just said, that as if you improved it and then you ruined it, and it is usher. It is usher. So when our Mishnah says that Noisen Tam Lebgam is mutter, is talking about that the grisin were hot. So when you poured the vinegar, you completely ruined it. But if it was cold, so initially it improved it, then afterwards it ruined it, or it gave a bad flavor, then it is awesome. We look at it as a positive thing. The same thing. The same thing. But it fell when it's cold, and you heat it up afterwards. As if you improved it, and then he ruined it, but also it's forbidden. Likewise, Dimi came along, he said the same thing. Then he said further. In fact, this is a delicacy. They used to do the Arvei Shabbos and Erev Shabbos, the Tzipodi. This is what they did Erev Shabbos and Tzipodi. What? They used to take the vinegar and put it onto cold split beans, and the Koyenois, they used to call that Shachlaim. Shachlaim is cress, and they used to call that Shachlaim. It was some kind of a delicacy. In other words, it proves our point that vinegar in cold split beans is actually a good thing. And so when our Mishnah says that it's pagam, it's a bad thing. It's talking about where it was hot, and therefore you ruined it. The Gemara says further, Omar Reish Lakish comes along Reish Lakish and says, Noisen Tam Lebgam. This chiddush of our Mishnah, that Noisen Tam Lebgam, even though it's treif or aser, it's really not a problem, and it's mutter. It's talking about Sha'amru Loishi Yomru. He says like there's two views of Reish Lakish. What happens if the food already was no good, and then what you added, something treif, it just made it a bit worse. Already the food is not tasty, didn't have enough spices, didn't have enough salt in there, and this just added something to it. Is that also called Noisen Tam Lebgam? It's ruining it, and therefore it's mutter? Or do we say no? Noisen Tam Lebgam is mutter only when this is the only thing that's causing it to have a bad taste, and since the treif is the only thing that's causing it to have a bad taste, then it didn't add anything, didn't contribute. But if anyway it had a bad taste, the treif just adding a bit more, but didn't make any major changes, then you have treif there, and it is also. So two views of Reish Lakish. View number one. So he says in number one. Not that you should say, you can't eat this, there's not enough salt in there. Or you say the melech, way too much salt. Or chasei the tablin, it doesn't have any spices, or you say the tablin has an excess amount of spices. In other words, the food itself is already bad. And then you add a little bit of treif or iser, and it ruins it. That's not called Noisen Tam Lebgam. You have treif in there, it will be usher, unless there's shishim. Nothing should be missing. The only reason why you're not going to touch this food now, or why you don't appreciate the food, is because the treif that came in there ruined it. That's called Neisa Tam Lebgam. The treif didn't contribute anything at all to this food. But if it's bad anyway, then adding treif that isn't very good will be usher. That's one version. So the Mishlok is being machmir. The other version is that he's being mekel. We don't say chaseda melech, chaseda melech, chaseda tavon, chaseda tavon. Elahashta miya hapogma. The fact is, this treif does not add anything to it, and therefore it's not answering the food. I don't care that the food anyway was no good, as long as this treif is pagim. So these are two versions of Reish Lakish. Comes along Rabbi Vu, and it says name Rabbi Yochanan, and we're going to see now that we're going to side with the second opinion of Reish Lakish. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol sheta'amai umamoshay osir. If the thing itself, the time of the thing, and the mamoshes, the iser is there and the taste is there. Asr, it is asr, like in olive. That's an isr in the Torah. You eat treif, a kazayis of treif, you get malchus, and the chiddush is the zeo kazayis b'chidei achilas pras. You don't have to eat the kazayis in one go. If you ate the kazayis over a certain amount of time, the time it takes to eat a pras is a half a meal. A loaf of bread is 2 meals, so half a loaf of bread is considered 1 meal. Machlek is the Rambam and Rashi, whether a full loaf of bread is 8 eggs or a full loaf of bread is 6 eggs. Therefore, half of that is either 4 eggs or 3 eggs. The time it takes to eat 4 eggs, or the time it takes to eat 3 eggs, that's the time of achilas pras. So when it comes to iser, we say that from the beginning when you start, most opinions say, from when you start eating till you finish eating should be the time of achilas pras. Then we say it's one ma'achul, it's one eating, and if you ate a kazayis, it is asr. However, and if it took longer than that, then we say it's 2 different eatings and they don't combine and you don't get malchus. The same thing when it comes to a mitzvah. When you eat matzah, when you eat the whole, you eat matzah, it's kedei achilas pras. So we have a certain amount of time that you have to eat the entire kazayis from when you start eating to you end eating. And there's a big machlek, as you know, in all the poskim, how long achilas pras is. Anywhere from 4 minutes to 30 minutes. And then on Yom Kippur, try to be mekel if you can, down to 4 minutes to space it out if you have to, if it's very serious. And so that's what achilas pras. There are some opinions. The Torah Chaim brings that there's an opinion from one of the Shainim. Achilas pras does not mean from when you start eating to you finish eating, but the break between the eating. If there's a span, more than achilas pras, when you finish your first bite till you start your next bite, then it separates them into 2 different achilas. But if you continuously eat, every couple of minutes, even though it might take you 20 minutes to finish the entire kazayis, they argue that's considered achilas pras, as if you ate the entire, the entire amount in the allotted time. Another machlek is we had them sachin daf mevov. When we say you ate a kazayis achilas pras, does it mean you had to eat a kazayis of the treif? What happens? You ate a kazayis of this mixture, but part of that kazayis was the treif that got mixed in, and part of the kazayis is the heter that was there. Do the heter and the iser mitzdarif? And we say, well, you ate a kazayis, and since the iser is there and the iser is visible, so the heter becomes part of the iser, and they both combine to make it a kazayis, and you get malchus. That's the machlek is there we had. Okay, so that's part number 1. Then he continues. If you only have the tam, but you don't have the mamash, right? For example, Rashi gives 2 examples. One example, everyone agrees with Rashi. The other one, everyone argues. Rashi gives one example, treif of fats that melted and got absorbed into your meat. So the tam is there of the fats, but there's no mamashas left. It all melted, it all disintegrated. It's gone. Rashi gives another example, milk that fell into meat. And that's tam oiveloi mamoshay, and they ain't like love machlekes showing you whether it means mahatoida still also you don't get malchus, or even mahatoida there's no iser. And the problem with Rashi and the milk is, I mean, by basar b'chalav, they say, if we hadn't tasted a few days ago as well, that the whole idea of basar b'chalav is that they can mix together and the milk gets lost in the meat. So what are you telling me? If the milk gets lost in the meat, it's no longer basar b'chalav. I mean, then what's basar b'chalav? Only if you see the milk on top. I mean, when you cook the meat, the milk always disappears. So they all argue on Rashi regarding the chalav. But the bottom line is, you have here taste of the Isa, the mamash is disintegrated, the fat's disappeared. Is ain't like in love. But then he says it, the im riba tam lebgam, but if the tam lebgam just increased, now what kind of expression is increased? Should have said that if the Isa gives a bad taste, then it's mutter. It says increase, sounds like already it was pagam, already the food wasn't tasty, there's no salt, there was no spices, nothing else. And then this Isa riba added another reason why it's not so tasty, because this trait that fell in there is not very, it's not very, it's not contributing at all to the flavor, then mutter. So that proves the second version of Rish Lakish, as we'll see, that it's lekula, that if the nation tam lebagam is just adding to already other issues you have, it doesn't matter. The trait is as if non-existent. The lema let him say, Im nasa tam lebagam mutter. Hakamar teacher the avagav dika milach yosa the pogba bahade. Even though the other things that's ruining the food as well, nevertheless, it's considered nation tam lebagam as mutter. The hilchasa kelishna basa the Rish Lakish, and the halach is like the second lashon of Rish Lakish. Now there is a big machlekes Rishonim, just talking about nation tam lebagam, that those cases where we say mashahu, for example, chametz and pesach. The big machlek is the chametz and pesach, where we say that even the minutest amount of chametz, and you can have a multiple of 1,000 times of non-chametz, it's still aser. What would the din be on Pesach nation tam lebagam? If the chametz is actually foul, what's the din then? So others say, well, nation tam lebagam is universal. It applies everywhere, including in those cases which is aser mashu, yain nesach, chametz and pesach. But others totally disagree. They say, if a mashu is usher in 1,000 times, there's nothing there. It's a multiple of 1,000. There's no isa there at all. It's not noticeable. It's not felt. Nothing else. And yet it's usher. So noisen tam lebagam, there's nothing there. But since it started out as an isa, it's usher as well. And they argue that there's no noisen tam lebagam on Pesach. You can't rely on that heter. And in halacha we say the chatchilu should be machmer, but the ever we're mekel. So there's a big machlekes how far we take neisan tam lebagam. So the Gemara continues. Omar Rav Kahana says, Medivre kulam nilma, from all these opinions we had till now, it's quite obvious that everyone takes it for granted that neisan tam lebagam is mutter. That the neisan tam lebagam is mutter. That's the comment Rav Kahana made. Omar le'Abaye, Abaye said to him, I agree with you that from everyone else, the way they're talking, you're right. When the Shlokish talks about Neisan Tam Lebagam and the two opinions Shlokish, he doesn't say that that's his opinion. He uses the word Amru, they say. So maybe Ka'amar, he's just repeating what they say, but personally, he doesn't hold of it. Anyway, the Gemara comes along and makes a comment. So Rav Kahana says that you see from everybody, we can glean from their comments that Neisan Tam Lebagam is mutter. So the Gemara asks, why do you even have to say that? Is there anybody who disagrees or holds that Neisan Tam Lebagam is actually usher? Is there anybody who says that Neisan Tam Lebagam is actually usher? Says Gemara, yes. But Tanya, we learned the following: Echad Neisan Tam Lebagam, whether the tam is ruining the food, whether the time is actually supporting the food, Asr is forbidden. Divi Rab Meir, these are the words of Rab Meir. Rab Meir holds clearly that Neisan Tam Lebagam is forbidden. Rab Shimon says no. Like what we learn, if the treifet is contributes in a positive way, Asr. But the Pagam mutter. Now let's understand. My time with Rameh, why does he hold that the flavor of the treif actually ruins the food? Why should he hold it's been usher? Says the Gemara, my time Rameh. The reason is says Gemara Gomar. He learns out what we learned in Pashas Matas. They went to the war in Midian, and then Eliezer gave them all the instructions about kashering. Now the goyish pots and pans had absorbed treif in it, but by the time the Eden got it and they were going to use it, it is no longer a tam l'shvach. The flavor, the taste that are exuded from the pot is nice and tam l'bgam. And yet he told him to kasher it. Doesn't that prove that nice and tam l'bgam is still asr? Says the Gemara, my time in Gommi, look, the gave a lousy taste, and the Torah asked it. So we see clearly from here that even though the taste is what do you call it? It does not contributing, it's still awesome, even though it's ruining it. Says the Gemara, so therefore in every instance, that's talking about the flavor that's in the pots. But when they will learn out any treif, if you put vinegar in the split beans, it's hot, it ruins it. It is still awesome. No, the idach. We who hold that nice tam lagam is mutter. Why do we kasher kalim? Why do you have to kasher kalim for? Why did Eden then have to kasher kalim? So we answer Rav Huna Bereya de Rav Chia. Rav Huna says that the taste that's inside the keli does not become pagam straight away. You got to wait a day. And it's from the Torah, it seems to say that if you want to use it today, you have to kasher it. The Torah is only talking about if you want to use it today, then it's not l'bgam yet. You have to kasher. If you want to use it tomorrow, as we'll see, then mahatorah you don't have to kasher. We kasher kalim only midirabanan. Every keli, in fact, there's a rule: stam kalim will have more chulin. The stam kalim of goyim are considered eina bas yema, were not used today. Were used yesterday. So mahatorah you can use a tray for keli no problem if it's more than 24 hours old. However, the rabbanon will goyzer eina bas yema otu bas yema. Rabbanon said, if we're going to allow you to use these pots, tray for pots, and use it for others. The idach. How's Rameh going to contest that? He says, Rameh says that the moment that it's not fresh, it's not adding anything. Or even though it's adding something, it's also ruining at the same time. It's giving you some flavor, and that's sufficient. And the Chachamim say that flavor is not yet considered pogum at all. Or even if it's a little bit pogum, there's so much benefit coming from it. The other advantages of having this flavor that the little bit of pogum doesn't concern us. It's only when it's more than 24 hours old. Now, when we say bas yoma, that a kededa bas yoma, big machlekes showing Rashi beitam whether bas yoma means overnight or 24 hours. How long do we say that? Wait, you're told your spoon became treif. Wait till it's not a bas yema before you kasher it. So then the rules of shishim and all that makes it much easier. So what does ein the bas yema mean? Does it mean just leave it overnight, or it means actually wait 24 hours? And we try to be machmir wait 24 hours. Then there's a Rameh that learns completely different than all the Rishonim. Not brought down in Shulchan Aruch, but it's brought down in the Rishonim. The Rameh says, everyone learns Kededa bas yema means it was used today, and ein bas yema means it was used yesterday. Rameh says that's not what it means at all. Rameh says Kededa bas yema means it was only used once. If the keli was only used once, you can never. It's always the next time you use it, it's treif. But if the keli was used a number of times, because there's always some absorption from last week and 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago, all the flavors inside the pot they sort of an aggregate, and they're getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So then, if it's not a bas yema, then it's easy. Then we say that it's mutter because the buildup of pogum. But if it's only used once, then it's usher forever. That's how he learns. So the Gemara, and there's also machlekes of shaynim if you're allowed to use. The whole reason why you have to kasher if it's more than 24 hours is because of a gzeira ein the bas yema to bas yema. There's a machlekes of shaynim that hold that you're allowed to use your milchige pots for fleishik whenever you want, as long as you wait 24 hours. Because they add. You have a few factors there. Number one is it's nice and tam l'bgam. Number two is that it's what it absorbed in the first place was heter. There was never any iser inside absorbed in the pot. Treif, there was a treif already in the pot. And when the treif entered the pot, it was proper treif. So that the pot became treif. And then now you have to exude that. So we have the only heter is ein bas yema. So we say, well, let's be goyzer ein bas yema, ot bas yema. But when you have a milchige pot, for example, the milchige pot, A milk pot is kosher. Nothing wrong with milk pot. So therefore, already you have a thing called hetera bola. It absorbed only heter. And then you have it's ein abasyema. It's not a day old, and so on. So therefore, they want to say that maybe you can use it. Use it. We definitely say you're not allowed to, but with the Evid, if you did, we say it's mutter because we have a concept called not barnat lehetera. In other words, the milk that's there is a nice and tam, and it and or not letera. And what came out, if it's not basyema, if it's over 24 hours old, so we say that what came out was heter. There was nothing treif over here, and it's a not banat, and therefore with the Evid, it might be mutter.
Does it
Whatever
work
you
the
have in
other
that
way
pot.
around?
Especially the other way around. If you cook, for example, sorry, take it back. If you cook parvelokshin in a milchige pot, so it's sorry, in a fleshige pot, let's say, and then you put cheese in there. So we say that the lukshin is no problem because the lukshin was cooked in a fleshige pot. It's a not barnat leteda, and especially in other words, the taste that went into there, and then the flesh into the lukshin, and now. Sorry, it's a not letata, especially if it's more than 24 hours old. We say that's not letata with the not lebagam, with the fact that it's pogum, so it makes it easier. The main thing is the reason is because the whole thing was heta from the beginning. Had it been a trefa pot, is a different story because then you have not isura. The taste is an isidic taste. Here it was a hetatic taste. So we use it in many instances, in many other cases. So the Gemara continues. So I think about it further. Rav Shimon, my timer. Why does Rav Shimon say that Oishim only knows that Noitzacham has mutter? The Tanya we learned. Where does he know that from? We learned you should not eat any nevela. We had a few times before, like geir Hashem b'sharecha. And what should you do with the nevela, the carcass? The geir that's living in your thing, you sell it or you give it to the geir. So we dashen. Kol haruya legeir krui nevela. If it's suitable to be consumed, to be eaten, it has a status of an nevela. So therefore we say la geir Hashem b'sharecha titnena, or you sell it and so on. But you ain't really gay, ain't a krunavela. But if it's not suitable to be eaten, it's no longer called an avela. In other words, if it's pegam, it's not an avela. Nu v'rameir, and Rameir, what's he going to do? It seems to be in the pasuk that it's not edible, it's no longer an avela. How come Rameir says that nation town of pegam is asa, or pegam is asa? Rameir ahu lemuute shrucha mekara. You're right. We're saying it has to be able to be consumed. That's and not what in contrary, as opposed to if the animal, even when it was alive, it was a mukashchin, it was not suitable to be eaten at all. It was a very sick animal. An animal like that, that was a very sick animal, you're right, was pogum. But a normal, healthy animal, even though now the taste became foul and so on and so forth, it is usher. But only if it's srucha mi'ikara, if it was foul from the beginning, then we say that it's I agree that it's mutter. But Rav Shimon says, "Srucha mikara." You telling me that the pasuk is only out to tell you something that was foul from the beginning? Lo tzricha miyuta. You don't need a meat. Afara ba'almu. If it never had any taste, it was a sick animal all along. It's just like dust. The Torah wouldn't have to tell you that it's not called an avela. The Torah wants to tell you that only something fit for consumption is called an avela. The Torah is making a chiddush. The chiddush is that it started out healthy and it was trade for everything else, but now it became foul. It is mutter. Okay, we'll stop over here. Have a good Chodesh.